Welcome in to another edition of the podcast Odd Man Rush. I'm Will Highland. This is Kyle Diezel. Hope you're all having a great week. Wherever you may be, we're going to talk some hockey tonight with our Western Conference preview. Western Conference was a little bit of a wild card last year, wasn't as competitive as the Eastern Conference. But we're going to discuss tonight our previews for the divisions and what we just think about this conference in general. So with that, I'm welcoming in Kyle. Kyle, what's up?
Not much. Enjoying the nice weekend. Hopefully, you had a nice weekend yourself.
I did. I had a good weekend. So yesterday, I got to spend some time with my wife's family, which is great. I hadn't seen a lot of them in a while. Great weather. Watched some college football. And then today, did a lot of stuff outside. Was like all pumped up to do the show with you and to watch the Pats and the Cowboys. But alas, that was not really fun. So here we are. It's okay. But I think a great place to start, and this is a great segue. Dallas just rolled New England 38-3. Now, what do we think of the Dallas Stars in the Western Conference? A team that's had relative success in that conference for a few years now. Stanley Cup berth in 2020. First round exit in 2022 at the hands of the Flames. But I believe Dallas was the second round team last year, if I'm not mistaken. So, and
Yes.
Dallas is a consensus pick for a lot of folks that I was reading, being the winner, or at least, the runner-up of that division. But are they the only ones in the Central Division that can challenge Colorado?
Ah, good question. I mean, right now, I would say yes. They're the only team. I mean, Minnesota, as we know, has always been up and down, especially when it comes playoff time. I don't have enough faith in their current team, but I think Dallas is the only team quite ready to challenge Colorado. I don't see anyone else. Maybe Winnipeg gets lucky, but I think
Yeah,
Nashville's still working their way up. Chicago just got Connor Bedard, so I have high expectation for them, but I don't expect them to jump hoops and make all the way to the playoffs this year quite yet. But I think the Blues take a step back. I don't think they're gonna be as hot, and then Arizona's just
agreed.
Arizona, so
Yeah.
you don't count them.
Well, yeah. Well, let's break that down because I agree with you. I think Dallas, they've got Robertson. Sagan and Ben are getting older. They've been getting older for a few years. But to me, what makes Dallas dynamic is Jake Ottinger. I think Jake Ottinger is
Correct.
really good. I think he could be great. I think he could help the United States win a gold medal someday, possibly. Um, he's American, right? Yeah, we talked about that.
I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah. All right. So Jake Ottinger is the X factor for Dallas. Um, And much like their football team, he's one of the best young stars in the game, just like they have the Cowboys have Micah Parsons, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Stars have Jason Robertson and Jake Ottinger.
Yes.
And I think they're going to be the X factors. But you're thinking are you thinking Nashville's a playoff team?
I think they are sneak in there for a playoff team. I think they
Yeah.
could potentially take out Winnipeg. I just don't know if they're ready to take that step. Is the key question. I haven't seen too much excitement this preseason so far from them, but they definitely need to take the next step of they can make the playoffs. They need to show me something in the first, at least quarter of the season.
I agree. If you look at Nashville specifically, I'm going to pull up their lines here. I did look at it a couple of hours ago. Um, if you pull up Nashville, they got older on purpose.
Yeah.
They have Cody Glass down the middle. He's their number 2 center. You think Ryan O'Reilly is going to be their number 1 center? They bringing him in as a veteran leader. They've got Gus Nyquist, who they bring in as a veteran leader. Um, They also bring in Ryan McDonough, and Tyson Berry comes back
Yeah.
after that trade with Edmonton last year. So they're bringing back, they're kind of an older team. But I think Nashville will be a playoff team. I don't know what we said earlier on other podcasts, like during free agency or whatever. But the more I think about it, I do think Nashville had a pretty good off season. So I think they're okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my 1 through 8, and then we'll just hash it out.
Okay.
I think Colorado's number 1. I think Dallas is number 2. I got Nashville. Then I got Minnesota, Winnipeg. Then I got St. Louis, Chicago, Arizona.
I I have the same thing except switching Minnesota and Tennessee there.
Oh, Nashville.
Yeah.
My one question with this division is really centered around the Winnipeg Jets. Last year they were battling for a playoff spot. I believe they end up edging the Flames to get into the playoffs.
Yes.
And then they just sort of ran off the train. Train went off the tracks, whatever metaphor you want to use. And now this year their offseason was very tumultuous. Pierre-Luc Dubois, he goes to Los Angeles. People talk about trading Mark Scheifele. People talk about trading Connor Hellebuck. It's just a load of just hodgepodge, everything going. They could go in multiple directions. They could be sellers in February. They could be buyers. They could re-sign some of these guys. I have no idea what's going to happen. So this division really hinges on, to me, like the middle part of that division really hinges on how competitive the Jets are going to be.
Yeah, I agree. It really depends on if they're going to be buyers or sellers halfway through the season. I mean, they're the only team I can see that can still squeak in to make the playoffs. It just depends on
Right.
are they gonna be a roller coaster team like they were last year and just tank when it gets to the playoffs, or are they actually going to be a legit potential contender this year? Is what I think I'm waiting to see from them.
Yeah, and St. Louis, I don't think they're a playoff team. I like
No.
Robert Thomas, but they just don't have any stars left.
Didn't they just lose their coach too?
Yeah. Oh, Berube? Did Craig Berube leave?
I think he had to because of something that happened with. I can't remember if it was the Blues or not, but I
Are you
think it
sure you're not
was.
thinking of the Blue Jackets?
Oh, I think it might be the Blue Jackets.
Yeah,
They're all.
because
They're,
because the Blue Jackets had to let go of Mike Babcock.
that's it. That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Getting the two blue teams mixed together,
Blue
but yeah,
Jackets, Blues. I mean, it's stupid that's confusing. I didn't really.
yeah. No, I mean that division. Clearly, we could see, like you said, we talk about Tennessee being the team that comes up. We could see any of these teams come up and take that potential wild card spot and or third spot for the playoffs. Because right now, there's only really two dominant teams.
Yeah.
That's Colorado and Dallas. No one else.
Yeah, I mean, as talented as Minnesota is, I have question marks about them. And by dominant, I mean dominant offensively. I mean, Kirill Kaprizov's really good.
Yeah.
And then Joel Eriksson Ek is really good. They're up front. They're a talented team, but I have question marks about longevity and depth with them. And then with Winnipeg, I talked about that. St. Louis talked about that. I guess the only thing left to say with Essential is the bottom of the division. We both think Chicago's going to be better than Arizona. And to me, it's not just about Connor Bedard. I think Connor Bedard is obviously going to be an X factor for that team for probably a decade, right? But
correct.
For right now, Taylor Hall and Tyler Johnson are pretty good ads to play on the wing with him. All right. And then I do really like the ad of Nick Foligno and Corey Perry as sort of veterans.
Yeah.
Sort of coach him up. And then, Jared Tenorti is going to go in there and throw a body around. I don't mind him playing on third line D. I mean, Ryan Donato playing on your third line. I think they might not be as bad as a lot of people think, and
No,
it might not
they're not.
just be because of Bedard. It could be some of these other pieces that they brought in around him.
Yeah, I mean, we really won't know until we see them play. I do think that they will need a couple years. I think if they surround Bedard with enough talent, being either it has to be youth or at least a little bit older players, not 30-plus-year-old players. They need someone that can fill in around him because he's their franchise right there. He's their franchise player. So I think at least the next 3 or 4 years, we can see the Blackhawks potentially being a contender in the next 3 to 4 years, I'd say.
Yeah. And I've talked about this with the Blackhawks too. I think bringing in Taylor Hall is probably the best move they made
Huge.
outside of the because multiple reasons, Kyle. You and I both have seen Taylor Hall play at a high level. He won
Mm-hmm.
a Hart Trophy as a member of the New Jersey Devils.
Yep.
He was very productive, I would say, for his 3 years in Boston. Maybe not to the level that people expect of him, but he played his role perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, and he's a former number one overall pick who was very hyped. So maybe not as hyped as Bedard. I was kind of young when that happened, but that was a pretty hyped pick when he went number one overall to Edmonton. He knows
Correct.
what it's like, and he's been around the block. He knows a lot about different NHL markets. He knows about how to be a pro. Um, he's still a really productive player. He's still got elite speed, an elite playmaking ability. And so putting him on the left wing of Connor Bedard, I think could be a really fun combination of old and new, young and old. Another Western Canadian kid as well.
Yeah.
Connor Bedard, I believe, is from Vancouver, and Hall is from Calgary. So both played in the Canadian juniors at a high level. So I would say that would probably be their best move, and they got Taylor Hall for almost nothing. I mean, they gave up a couple prospects for him. It was clearly a salary dump, and they've still got a ton of cap space. So here's the interesting thing to wrap up the bow on this division. Do you think if Chicago exceeds expectations, and if let's say they are fighting for a playoff spot, because I think you said in the summer that you wouldn't have been surprised if they fight for a playoff spot. Do they buy at the deadline if they're in it? I think they should.
They're in it. I think they should, but the question is who are you buying from?
I think they could buy from an Eastern team that, like Pittsburgh or something. I'm just throwing that out there, that might underachieve, and has a lot of veterans. I think about a guy like Rust, or Ricard Raquel from Pittsburgh as well. Somebody who, if they're not in it, and they have a lot of veterans, could get dealt. I could see them buying from another bad team like San Jose or Anaheim, in a different division, possibly. But I don't know. You raise a good point. Who are you going to buy from? They could buy from Calgary. They could buy from Winnipeg, another team in the West that's clearly going to have a top line center that might head to the market. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You obviously want to build around Connor Bedard being your future center, but I don't know if trading for a guy like Scheifele or Lindholm would be worth it. That might be crazy talk. But if they're in it, I think they should buy, because there's going to be no better preparation for Connor Bedard in playing in the playoffs than to have him play in the playoffs.
Yeah, he's gonna need that experience. I mean, we saw a lot of young players this year throughout this past year playoffs, that first year making it, how inexperienced they were. So as much time as you can get at a young age, the better he will be when he gets older.
Right. Think about the Devils. How beneficial would it have been last spring if that wasn't the first playoff run for a lot of those guys? it could have been much more beneficial for New Jersey. Just thinking about another young team. All right. Speaking of teams that have had generational players that need playoff success, Edmonton really is the story of the Pacific Division, which is crazy. And it's crazy that we barely talked about Colorado, by the way, in the Central. I think we'll talk about them in a second when we talk about the playoffs, but it's also weird to talk about this Pacific Division where the Vegas Knights just won the Stanley Cup. And then meanwhile, Edmonton's really the story of this division. So what do you make of the Pacific in the Edmonton and Vegas dynamic?
I mean, I love it. It's a great for the overall division, I would say. I think that division out west is probably the best division out of the two. Definitely very competitive. Lots of rivals. You've got also the Kings there. You also have the Kraken who are also there. So you've got a lot of tough competition. I think any of those four teams could definitely make the conference finals out of the Pacific, I'd say.
Yeah,
Those four teams I named.
absolutely. I mean, I think the Pacific is going to drive this conference, which is crazy because Dallas and Colorado in the Central are good. I think they're playoff locks, barring a major injury or whatever.
Correct, but I don't think they stand a chance against any of these teams as we saw this past year.
I would never rule out Colorado because of how dominant they are and how well stretched out they are, diversely talented, offensively and defensively. Excuse me, but with Edmonton, and I know what the big question with Edmonton is, and what it's always been. It's been defense and goaltending. We
Correct.
know that McDavid, Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent Hopkins, Evander Kane, Connor Brown, Zach Hyman, these guys are going to score a shit ton of goals. But what's it going to be when push comes to shove and you're running out there in a 7-game series in May with Stuart Skinner or Jack Campbell?
I mean, that's the big question. I mean, that's what we saw this past playoffs. It wasn't. I mean, Vegas held them pretty well. They were defensively solid. That's what killed the Oilers. They weren't able. They were still able to put points up, but
Yeah.
Vegas was able to hold them in check for majority of the series, and I think that's their biggest concern going forward. I mean, yeah, they picked up what they did for Barry for defense. He's an offensive scorer as a defenseman.
Well, they dumped Barry in favor of Matthias Ekholm.
No, that's it. Yes.
Yes, but I think you correctly point out that kind of player because that's what Darnell Nurse is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of their defensemen have been. They've been more puck moving guys, and they need to get heavier and they need to get meaner.
Yeah,
right?
they don't have.
That was the Bruins' problem. They were amazing, flashy in the regular season, and then Charlie McAvoy is supposed to be their big, beefy defenseman, and I mean, it's not enough to just rely on one guy. You need to have like 2 or 3 guys who can throw their weight around in the playoffs.
Yeah, because you're going to go through 6 defensemen per night. You need to at least have 1 per line, so at least 3.
Right. And so that's going to be the big question with Edmonton. It's not. We know that Connor McDavid's probably a lock to win the Hart or at least be a top 3 vote getter. We know that they're going to score a bunch. But that's your big question is their defense and goaltending.
I mean they'll probably win the Pacific with probably like 110 points this year, but like cool, you can score as many points as you want regular season, but in the playoffs, as we saw, if your goaltending isn't up to par or your defense, you're not going to go anywhere. I think this could be it for Connor. We might see a generational talent like with Austin Matthews never reached the Stanley Cup Finals because the lack of defense and goaltending they have.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about it. And they've had cracks. I mean, Edmonton's had some cracks. It's not like they've been bad. Like when Hall was there or when our RNH got drafted. They weren't really good. But now they've got McDavid and they've made the playoffs like several years now. And they've been disappointing every year. But do you think Vegas is going to have a Stanley Cup hangover? Because I don't. I don't think so
I
because I've seen Bruce Cassidy led teams just keep churning out winning regular seasons over and over again, no matter what
no,
happens in the playoffs.
I totally agree. I mean, he's done it before. I mean, this is a very veteran heavy team. I don't think they don't have many draft picks. I believe. I think a lot of the draft picks were traded or young talent were traded away to help
Right.
build their current team of veteran players. And I think right now they're still, I think, the favorites to still go back and win it. I don't think they had much change this offseason. They have the most experience and probably the most experienced coach right now. So I think they're the team to beat. I mean, like I said, we can talk about Edmonton, how much they can score, but we saw in the playoffs last year how they shut down every team they played in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they can do whatever they can. They're like a chameleon, Kyle, right? They can be whatever team they want to be in that moment. Like they have
Yeah,
the
they
talent to do
to
that.
every situation in front of them, whatever they need to do forever that series or game, they adapt to it and
If
make
they
those
need a
changes.
goalie to stand on his head, they found guys. They recycled guys that you had never heard of before out there last year, winning with different guys. They have defensemen who can step up and make plays. I mean, I think Shea Theodore's criminally underrated in the league.
Mhm.
I think that they have. I'm just looking at their roster here. I mean, they have so much depth in their defense between Martinez, Petrangelo, Shea Theodore, McNabb, and then Hagen Whitecloud. I mean,
Yeah,
that's really good, well-rounded top six. Their power play is really good. Stevenson's really underrated as a second line center. We know how good Eichel and Mark Stone are. I mean, their whole roster is just they can be whatever they need to be in that moment to win a game. It's remarkable.
it's incredible. Where do you have them ranked in the current standings in the Pacific?
So I think they'll be second. I think much like the Central, it is sort of a two-person race for the number one spot. Uh,
Yeah,
I do think so, and I think ultimately Edmonton they might win more games like 6-3 or whatever, right? But I think in the playoffs, Vegas is built more for a playoff run, but in the regular season, I think Edmonton might sneak away with that division crown. Now, where I might differ from you is I think Calgary is going to have a rebound season. Um, that team has so much, and I know they traded away. They traded away Toffoli, right? You know
yeah.
that, right? You know that. Um, and they, so they're not going to have their best scorer from last year, but they have youth in places that I think a lot of people aren't recognizing. The one huge question with the Flames is going to be uh, is Elias Lindholm going to get extended, or are they going to have this looming thing all year round, or all year long? Because if they're not in it, they need to deal him in
I think
February.
it's gonna
They might
depend on
need to, they might need to
go.
deal him anyway.
It sounds like it's gonna depend on how the season goes. I'm
Right.
going to assume. At least the first quarter of the season.
Right. They need to figure it out. But I think Calgary could be third at their peak. And so I'm gonna keep them there. Um,
Okay.
because I really like Blake Coleman still. And Matt Coronado is young. They have really high expectations for him. He's gonna play on their second line with Kadri and Dylan Dewey, most likely. I think Huberdeau is too good to have like had more than one bad year in a row. I think Huberdeau will have a bounce back year. And then I think on their defense, they missed Oliver Shillington last year. I
Yeah.
don't think you can bank on him playing again. This year, I don't know what's going on. There was some things happening with him um, personally, so I don't know if he's going to play. But even so, I like their defensive pairing. I really do. I think Mackenzie Weegar is due for a bounce back season. I think Osterley could be better. He's young, so we'll see what he does. So, and last but not least with Calgary, I think their goaltending has to be better because Jacob Markstrom was not good last year, and that's a reason why they missed the playoffs. In my opinion, they missed it by a few points. If he was just better in some of their games, then they would have been in the postseason. So that's where I have Calgary. Who do you have in the 3 spot?
I have the Kings as the
Yeah,
3 spot right now.
I have them at 4.
And then I have Seattle at the 4 spot, and then I have your Flames at the 5 spot. I just don't think, depending on what they're, like you talked about, like depends on their goaltending. If their goaltending can step up, then I can see them jumping up. But going off of what I saw last year, I I can't move them up quite yet.
They lost a lot of games that they should not have lost because of their goaltending. Dan Vladar was not good in a backup role. Uh, Markstrom was really bad. Um, I think Seattle and Los Angeles benefited from that in the division, and I think Seattle. So I had Seattle as my 5. I wouldn't rule out Seattle being a wild card team though, and being better than Minnesota or Winnipeg, and therefore
Correct.
making
They
the
could they
playoffs.
could jump they could definitely jump up. I definitely don't see the last 3 teams on our list having a chance. I
No,
don't
no.
Vancouver, sadly, no, and then it's a battle between last place between the Sharks and the Ducks.
Yeah, Vancouver's a really confusing team. They just had so much. They had so much talent, and then they just couldn't gel, and so now it's all kind of over. I mean, they still have JT Miller and Brock Besser and Elias Peterson. Those are all 3 really solid players in their top 6. I think Connor Garland's okay, in sort of that middle 6 role.
They got the new
Um,
captain Hughes.
right, Quinn Hughes on their defense, but then like after that, it's just I mean, Oliver Ekman-Larsson's gone. He's in Florida now. It's sort of a big drop off after that.
Yeah,
And then in net, I think Demko was really disappointing last year, but they they uh, they just aren't really built like tough enough. They just
no,
don't. They're just not a tough team. And then Anaheim, I mean, they're just
they're still. I don't know if they're on a rebuild or what they're doing. We know the Sharks are on a rebuild. I have no
yeah.
idea what they're fully trying to do.
I don't understand what San Jose is doing because they re-signed Thomas Hurdle
Yeah,
a couple years ago. They were truly interested in rebuilding. They would have gotten picks for him, which they could have dealt him for at least 1 first-round pick.
hey, they at least dealt Carlson.
They finally got rid of Carlson, yeah. So I think you're right. They are rebuilding, but it's just really confusing, San Jose, because I look at the rest of their lineup and like Logan Kuchar's okay, Anthony Duclair, that's an interesting.
He's old though, isn't Logan Kuchar up there?
I don't know how old he is. Barbanoff is an interesting player. Anthony Duclair comes over from Florida. Um, but like the rest of their roster is just a bunch of. I mean, Jan Rutta's okay. I mean, he's kind of his years are past him. Um,
Yeah, they're definitely on that. They're definitely on the reset
yeah, I
phase
mean, I'm
for the West
looking.
Conference.
You're right. I'm looking at their roster here. Mackenzie Blackwood as their backup goalie. I mean, Capo Kakinen as their goalie. He used to be in Minnesota, I believe. Um, they're just they're sort of meddling at best, but probably going to tank again. They just I don't know. There's not really a guy that I've heard of so far this year. Obviously, we had Bedard, and then there was Shane Wright, and there's been uh, some years where you can identify somebody, but I don't know who like the big prospect is to try and get this year. But whoever that is, they should sort of be in on him. Like same thing with Anaheim. Like I don't know what Anaheim's doing.
Anaheim's a mess. I mean, they can't even decide if they want to keep some of their stars. It's kind of frustrating to see as
Well,
a Duck.
McTavish and Zegras are good, and if they were really trying to win, they would try and build around those guys. Um,
Correct. Yeah, I don't know why they're not trying or attempting with all this cap space they've got.
Right, and I mean, they've got some guys that are left over that are. It's interesting. They've got Radko Gudits and they've still got Cam Fowler, so they brought in some guys from from other teams in terms of Gudis, and they still got Fowler as sort of their mainstay there. But
Mhm.
I mean, they just look lost, and I would personally, if I were them, they've got all this cap space. I mean, we saw they traded away Hampus Lindholm a couple of years ago. They got a bunch of picks for that from us, the Bruins. Um, I'm just looking around like, if you're not sure about building around McTavish and Zegras, then maybe you should just trade one of them. I mean, like, what do you? I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what the plan is there. I think Anaheim, San Jose, and Arizona are going to all run in a race to see who can be the worst in that conference.
Most likely, yes.
It's nuts. I can't believe it. Um, the bottom of that division could be pretty bad. I think I had Vancouver being a playoff team last year. That was a miss on my part. I also had Calgary being a playoff team. That was a miss. Um, we didn't talk about the Kings much or the Kraken much in passing. Um, what do you think the Kraken have this year that will be their reason for either making or not making the playoffs?
They've got a solid defense. I mean, that's what we saw last year. They were playing solid defense all year round, and that's what kind of propelled them to be that team to make them through to the playoffs. But they didn't have enough offense, and that's what really killed them, I believe, in the playoffs. And I think they need to. I don't know if they have gotten enough from this free agency to pack a punch for the offense, but they're solid defensively. That's why I have them still making the playoffs. It's just I don't think they have enough firepower to help propel that.
Yeah, they're really top heavy on their offense. Beniers, McCann, and Eberle, that's a good top line.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, like I like bringing in Dumoulin on their defensive pairing. I think Grubauer will be better this year in that. So I don't think they're going to be bad. I just think Los Angeles is better, as do you. I think, right? Like I just think
Yeah.
Los Angeles they pack more of a punch. I mean, they still got
Pack more of a
Kopitar.
punch. They've won Stanley Cups in the last previous few years too.
Well, it's
They
been
have
a
some
while.
veterans that have been there.
Yeah, true. Kopitar's still around. Bringing in Luke Dubois, though, is going to be huge for them. Byfield, I
Correct.
think, is really good, really underrated. I'm looking at the rest of the roster here. Drew Doughty's still around. You're right. That's another guy from years gone by. But the big thing for them is I don't love Phoenix Copley or Cam Talbot in net. Uh,
You
they
never know. Surprise us.
right. I think personally, the Kings should have swung for a goalie in the offseason. Clearly they were moving on from Quick, right? They dealt him,
Yep.
but I think they should have gone for Linus Ullmark or Connor Hellebuck and just called the Jets and the Bruins on those guys, or even on Swayman. I mean, if I was the Los Angeles Kings and I knew I was really a strong goalie away in a division full of good goalies, I mean, I think, well, maybe
Good
not full.
high
I
power
think
offense.
I think Grubauer, Demko, Markstrom. I mean, that's who they're going to be competing with is these other goalies. So that's what I would have done. What were you saying?
Oh yeah, no, they should have. I mean, there are a lot of goalies available this year, and they just decided to wait, which I was surprised on, since that's really what hurt them in the playoffs was goaltending a little bit, not having that depth. So I think if they just got one more piece, they could be knocking on the door or something.
Yeah, I agree. So, all right, as we're starting to wrap this up here, we've gone through the divisions. Let's move on in the playoffs. Um, as our last step here.
Mm-hmm.
Who are your playoff teams, and who are the last two standing?
Okay, so my playoff teams start with the Central. Um, I've got Colorado at number one, Dallas at number two. I got Minnesota at number three, and I have Nashville at four. It's a wild card contender. And then for the Pacific, I have Edmonton as number one, Knights number two, LA at number 3, and then at number 4, I do have the Kraken. So those are the four. Those are the 8 teams I have picked to move on forward to the playoffs.
And who are the last two in the conference final?
Ooh, depending on who's playing who, I do have the Knights playing probably gonna have to be, depending on how healthy Colorado is, they could make it, but I do have Dallas facing the Knights in the finals.
Kings and the Stars. I like that. All right. So here's who I have. I'll start with the Pacific. I've got Edmonton number 1. They're going to
Yeah.
be the division winner. Got Vegas number 2. Got the Flames number 3. I know it's a little bit of a swing for me. I got the Los Angeles Kings at number 4 as a wild card. And then here's where I'm a little different. In the Central, I got Colorado, Dallas, and Nashville. I think Seattle will best Minnesota.
Okay.
And end up jumping them. I think Minnesota, they're built top heavy in some regard. I don't love the Wild's goaltending situation as it stands right now. I think Marc-Andre Fleury's best days are behind him. I think Philip Gustafson's good but not great. And I think down the stretch, they're built very top heavy. Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek, Kirill Kaprizov. Beyond that, the rest of their forward group is not great. I mean, Pat Maroon's all right, but the rest of their forward group has some question marks there.
Yeah.
And as a result, I think a team like Seattle, a little bit more cap space, might be able to make a swing at a deadline and best out Minnesota for that spot. And then as a result, you get Seattle playing Edmonton in the first round. I think Edmonton wins that series. Then you've got Los Angeles playing, then you've got Los Angeles playing possibly Colorado. I think Colorado wins that series. And so I think when push comes to shove, you get a situation where I like Edmonton and Colorado in the finals. If the path gets you there, I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado fails. I don't think Calgary or Nashville are good enough to win their first round series. So I do think it's going to be like Vegas and Edmonton and Dallas and Colorado, and then the winners playing each other. And in this case, I'll take Edmonton and Colorado in the West final. So you had Vegas and Dallas, and I had Edmonton and Colorado. That's interesting. You taking the underdogs, and I'm taking the winners, but and I know I just went through how Vegas is built to win a
So you think this is the year the Oilers make it?
I think Colorado's back in the dance. I do. I think now I'm thinking I did just say early on how Vegas can change and chameleon like themselves. So maybe Edmonton doesn't get lucky. All right, I'm changing my pick. I'm going Vegas and Colorado.
Okay.
Going Vegas and Colorado. But no, I think Colorado's back in. I think Colorado's back in the Stanley Cup. I really do. I think they're that team. They have the players on both sides of the puck. I think they've got probably the top 5 forward in the world and probably a top 2 defenseman in the world. Yeah. And I think that's going to be good enough for them.
All right.
But we'll see. I mean, they do have a lot of new guys now that I'm looking at their roster, but we didn't talk about them much. but I think they're really good, and they can win no matter what you throw at them, much like Vegas. So I'll go Colorado in the Stanley Cup. So
Okay.
that's who I got. That's who I got. It's hard. I can't believe it. It's so hard. It's going to be even harder next week when we do the Eastern Conference, don't you think?
The East will be super hard.
Yeah, difficult. It's not easy. Not
No,
easy. This
never
league
is.
is this league is super hard to predict. Um, Last year, people thought the Blue Jackets were going to finish ahead of the Bruins in the Eastern Conference. Meanwhile, at the end of the year, I mean, granted, what happened to the Bruins is a different story. That's the playoffs. But at the end of the regular season, you had Columbus competing to be in the lottery, and you had the Bruins being the most winning regular season team of all time. So that's how hard
Yep.
this is to predict. Um, people thought that like me, I thought the Rangers were going to be right there. Um, I had Rangers and Avalanche in the Stanley
I
Cup.
think that's what you. I believe that was right. That's what you had.
Yeah, I think the Avs will be right back there, man. I do. So, do you think Vegas or Dallas will win?
Oh, I'm going Vegas. I'm riding the train.
It's hard. It's hard to get back there more than 1 year in a row. I mean, the Lightning are sort of the anomaly, not the rule. Um, in recent years, getting back there multiple years in a row, it's really
Yeah,
hard. It's
I think
really
the
hard.
other team would be the Blackhawks, right?
I
Blackhawks or
don't think
Canadiens?
they ever went back-to-back years, though. I think it was
No.
they won in 10, 13, and 15, but I don't think they lost in between. So no, they
Maybe
just
not.
it's hard. It's hard to get back there. I think the Bruins went in 11 and 13. They win every other year there. I think Tampa's sort of been the anomaly. Pittsburgh did it. They went back to back.
Yeah,
But I guess it's been Pittsburgh and it's been Tampa that have been able to get there back to back years. But I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy. I mean,
yeah,
Ovechkin most 12 years before he won a cup.
true.
It's crazy. It's such a hard league. That's why I'm excited for it. I think
It's gonna be.
I think it's something to be excited about.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a fun year this year. I think there's a lot of expectations, but also like lots of fun's gonna happen. It's
And
hockey season.
here's the crazy thing too, Kyle. I'll say this, then I'll give you the last word here. Um, the other crazy thing is that next July there's going to be so much free flowing cap space because the cap is going to go up,
Yep.
and then you're going to have the World Cup of hockey as well in 2025, and so next year is going to be even more entertaining, dealing with all that. So just keep that in mind too. It's nuts. It's going to be nuts. All right, I'll give you the last word.
Uh I mean, I'm just excited that hockey's gonna start in a week from now or so. So that's all I'm excited about to see what predictions we get right.
There's going to be a lot we get wrong. I don't know if you've taken a look at our NFL predictions versus reality the last week or so. I think we've been right about things, we've been wrong about things. That's how this goes. My baseball predictions, I had Atlanta and Seattle in the World Series. Fingers crossed that stays there. But we'll see what happens with our Stanley Cup predictions. I don't
100.
think anybody predicted last year. Florida, maybe some people did. I think a lot of people expected Florida to drop off. They were right there. They clawed back. And then Vegas with the new head coach and all those expectations. It's a hard league to predict, man. Sure is. All right, I know I said I'd give you the last word, but you made such a good point. I had to top it myself.
No worries.
All right. We'll be back, guys, next week. We're going to try and do an Eastern Conference preview. In the meantime, we'd like you to follow, like, share, and subscribe to this wherever you get your podcasts. That would be great. We can also find this in our own feeds at Home Field Advantage and at Filling Up. But until next time, I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you next time for our Eastern Conference preview. Thank you.